So most of you probably know me, but in case there are any new friends, I am the founder and org whisperer at Smooth Apps. I am a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer. I had the privilege of attending a training with Ken Schwaber back in the day when he used to do the training himself. And I also was interviewed and selected by him. I've got more than 20 years of IT experience in all kinds of industries. I'm the co-founder of Agile for Patriots and this meetup. And two things I'm really proud of are the Sabotage-Agile Manifesto and Sabotage-Agile Principles. So if you haven't read these blogs of mine, if you want to get a chuckle, I hope it will make you smile. And then some other things I'm really proud of are in partnership with the Scrum.org professional Scrum trainers, we created the software code of ethics, we co-created Scrum Pulse webinars, and we co-created the Scrum Tapas video series, all right? So with that, let's talk about superstitions, sins, and stances of product ownership. I want to talk to you about a superstition. I don't know if it is just an India thing or if it's there in America or other parts of the world as well. So here's the superstition. In India, when I was growing up, if ever, I'm sorry about that, my dog wants to get inside. So my study, so give me 1 second. I'm going to let her in, otherwise she won't let us proceed with this webinar. So 1 second. All right, sorry about that. We experienced some uncertainty. So here's the superstition we had in India, that if a black cat crosses the road, something horrible is going to happen if you immediately go down that road after a black cat crosses the road. So guess what? What are you supposed to get? I want you to guess, what did my mom tell me that I should do when a black cat crosses the road? Are there any takers?
Yeah, so Ravi, if it was like my dad, he used to actually use his fingers and cross them out on the windshield.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Does anybody else have any ideas or suggestions? Or did you hear your mom or dad tell you what to do if a black cat crosses the road? So you know what my mom used to say? Let someone else cross. So whatever bad is going to happen to somebody else. It sounds horrible. As I was preparing for this talk, I was realizing how horrible it was. But that's what we used to do in India, right? You wait for someone else to cross, or walk on that road. And once they've gone, then the bad things are going to happen to them. Now it's okay for you. So it's a very altruistic, very lofty, kind way to treat your fellow human. So if anyone invites an Indian, maybe in the post-COVID era, one day soon we will be able to invite each other to our homes and they are late, it's possible that a black cat crossed the road. Or I've given you a splendid excuse. Next time you are late, you can tell them, well, I am superstitious. A black cat crossed the road and that's why I'm late. So anyway, let's talk about a superstition. So what is a superstition? Looked it up. So it's either belief in something supernatural or some kind of unjustified supernatural causation, right? And that got me thinking, why are we superstitious? So what do you guys think? What makes human beings superstitious?
Human beings have a strong desire to tell stories about events that happen around them. They like to see in the world cause and effect, whether it's there or not. So if something happens timely to another unusual event, it's cause and effect. Yeah,
so we are meaning-making machines. I attended a course a long time ago. They would call us human beings are meaning-making machines. We have a desire to explain what's going on around us. And then the causality, as Stephen was saying, if we can establish causality, maybe it gives us a sense of control. What else? Can anybody else think about what makes us superstitious besides what Stephen said?
I'll just say, Ravi, sometimes it's just what we've been taught and what we've learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe it's something that's just passed down from someone we respect, like my mom or my dad. I was looking up what makes us superstitious. So this is one perspective. I'm not an expert in psychology. I have no idea if it's true or not. But I looked up this article, and so this person, Stephen Graff, says, so we make associations, we create links in an attempt to predict or control the future. And maybe something happened to our life and we made a story about it, and now it gives us more of an illusion of control. But I don't know to what extent we are in control of the world. Mother Nature is reminding us these days about who exactly is in control. So anyway, so maybe that's what makes us superstitious. Let's switch to product ownership. Let me ask you the question. If the reason we are superstitious is because we want to establish causality, and if the reason we are superstitious is it's a flawed technique to help us gain a sense of control over the universe, what have you found to be the single biggest or most damaging, most harmful superstition in the area of product ownership?
For me, it's a strong belief in causal determinism, that in a ambiguous and uncertain world, that there are things that have cause and effect. You can figure them out in advance. So.
Yeah, determinism, being able to predict the future, control the future. Very good. Thank you, Stephen. Anybody else have any experiences? What have you noticed in the industry, the single most damaging superstition around product ownership?
Assumptions about customer value.
Assumptions about customer value. Very good. Thank you, Brian. Pete?
Well, Brian kind of stole my thunder, but along those same lines is that the outcome that we're desiring is going to happen from the software we're building, that we don't take more of an experiment mentality. We just assume that we're building the right thing, and it may not be what the customer really wants.
Yep. I have another one.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
I have another one. It's just because I understand it means the team understands it. Kind of this, assumption that, I get it, therefore they get it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an invalid assumption. All right, let me share some of my observations. This is not the only list. It's just one of many lists. I'm sure you have your own. For me, I think the 8 most harmful superstitions. One is the product owner must not be trusted with budget or key decisions, or else they will just run wild. So the product owner is kind of like a low-level person, maybe more of an order taker. The product owner has to be the best expert in the product, almost like maybe a tech support person. They know their way around the product. They know every single itty-bitty detail. They have to be the subject matter expert. The product owner must single-handedly type in every user story, because if you don't, then it's a loss of control. God knows what those nitwit developers are going to build into the product, right? And in fact, we cannot trust those developers to design the solution. Not only must we tell them what is the intent or the outcome, we must actually prescribe the path to the outcome such that all that they have to do is to code the outcome. They don't have to think about what is the best path to the outcome, right? There's a waterfall kind of relic from the waterfall world where we used to have these phase gates. And in my days, I'm an old fart, we used to have this document called the PRD, Product Requirements Document, and God knows how many rounds of reviews we would go through, and finally the PRD would be frozen, and then all the VPs would, sign in blood, and they would they would promise to hand over their firstborn child if any contract was violated. So what we've done is we've taken that mindset and we have now carried that mindset forward into smaller PRDs. And the PRD is now a user story. And so the developers and the product owner, are, if they're on opposite sides, I'm sad to have to use that kind of language, but that's what I've seen. So now they weaponize the user story, and the developers are scared that the product owner is going to sneak one over me and trap me into saying yes to the user story. And then every time there's ambiguity, the product owner and I will have a fight. No, it's a defect. No, it's a feature. So the dev team says, I'm not even going to touch it if there is even a single unanswered question. And so they force the product owner to answer every single question. Or conversely, the product owner puts so much detail because he or she is scared that the developers won't do their job. And the last thing the product owner wants is the user story to be used as a weapon to say, aha, I got you, product owner. You did not mention it in the user story. It's not in Jira. Therefore, this is working as designed. It's not a defect, right? So the desire to make everything, the superstition that if you don't make everything perfect, if you don't answer all the questions in the user story, you're screwed. Something horrible will happen. Product owner has to attend every single daily scrum. If they don't, God knows what these nitwit developers are going to do. And the product owner must control the developers. Otherwise, again, who knows what will show up in the increment. Conversely, sometimes product owners say, hey, I hate IT, I can't stand IT. And okay, the CEO said we must be agile, we must use Scrum. So fine, I'll do the bare minimum I need to do to interact with those pesky developers. But I'm actually going to go and do real work. What fascinates me is the business side of things. I love talking to industry analysts. I love talking to customers. And that's what I love, being on sales calls. But that's my real job. And dealing with these pesky IT people is not something I love to do. I have to do it, so I'll do the bare minimum I can. Right? So these are some of the superstitions, the most harmful superstitions I've seen. Let me pause and get some quick feedback. Do any of these, which of these resonate the most with you, or which have you seen to be most prevalent in the industry? You can either type in a message on the chat panel or you could speak. Which of these have you seen to be the most damaging superstitions in your experience?
This is Steve again. For me, I think it's number one. I think that's well, I don't know. It's number one or number two. It's really hard to know, but those are both really damaging. I've seen, product owners lose respect to the team because they can't make any decisions. They can't change things. Mm-hmm. It's like, and there's this big delay. So you lose the respect of the entire development team. If you can't make any decisions, you can't do anything. You always have to run off someplace else.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else? Which of these have you found to be most damaging?
For me, Ravi, I don't know if you actually listed these in priority, but it's actually 1, 2, and 3 from my experience. They all have been uniquely damaging, and sometimes they've all been in play at the same time.
Very good. Thank you, Coach Washington. All right. Very good. So something to think about, something to guard against, and that segues into the cardinal sin, the deadly sins, 7 deadly sins of product ownership. Again, this is my perspective. So the first deadly sin is to withhold all the power and decision making from the PO and leave all the power with the exec. So now the product owner is nothing more than a glorified order taker. I prefer that we give a product owner a budget. So if you know the payroll of the Scrum team, and if you set the organizational goal or the outcome, then we get the heck out of the product owner's way and we say, okay, here is your annual budget. And here is the annual target, the most important goal, the wildly important goal. Now we're going to get the heck out of your way go and do whatever you think is appropriate, and we'll check in with you every 2 weeks. So at the sprint review. So with great responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility. So we're going to check in with you. It's not a blank check, but we're not going to make you come and beg us for budget or beg us for approvals. I've been in companies where the product owner couldn't make any decisions, and whenever they had to make a decision, they had to actually submit their epic or sometimes even user stories for approval to the executive roundtable, which comprised of the C-suite. And the C-suite and all the VPs, because they are busy, sometimes the roundtable would not meet until once in 2 or 3 months. So here's what's happening. The team is scrumming, the team is on 2-week sprints, 2-week cadence, but major decisions happen on a 3-month cadence, because all the power is held by the C-suite and the steering committee that is comprised of the C-suite and the VPs. And they meet once in 3 months, right? So this is an example. This makes no sense. Don't use Scrum. We ask the question, who's the most knowledgeable product expert? And if this is someone who just loves details, and you make that person the product owner. And very often, product ownership requires strategic thinking. And it's not that this person is not capable of strategic thinking. That's just not the game they want to play. Just like baseball is not a game that I want to watch. I watch the NBA, right? It doesn't make me hopefully a bad person. It doesn't make baseball a bad game. But if you force me to watch baseball, it's going to be painful for me, right? So put people in the game or in the position that they love to play. You put a person who doesn't want to play that position into a game, or in a game that they don't want to play, it doesn't help anyone, right? We forbid or we discourage developers from co-creating product backlog items, right? So this is where we say product owner is the only one who can type in the stories. It's not collaborative. If you look at the Scrum Guide very clearly says backlog refinement is a joint responsibility. Maybe the accountability, I'm paraphrasing here, or implying or going into the implication, but the product owner is accountable for backlog management, but the dev team is responsible, right? Or sometimes people who have a flawed or imperfect understanding of Scrum, either the spirit or the words, the letter, they say the product owner must say, you are going to use a checkbox, or you're going to use a radio button. And I've made this mistake myself while coaching. In fact, I've made this with JW's team, where I was corrected by either JW or his team, where they said, wait a minute, coach, don't tell us how to design. Tell me what you want. We are solid developers. We'll find the best path. Are you trying to say to us, coach, that you want the user to be able to pick one and only one option? Or are you telling us that the user must be able to pick multiple options? You tell us that, we'll find the best control, right? So the product owner should not prescribe how to get to the destination. They should just tell the team what is the destination and trust and empower them to find the best path to the destination. I was corrected in my Scrum.org professional Scrum product owner class when I used the phrase definition of ready, where Gunther corrected me to say, definition of ready can be a very dangerous term because it might institutionalize in Scrum that mindset of the phase gate in waterfall, where developers will not pick any item or start working on anything unless the PRD is frozen in double quotes, right? So since that class, I have started shifting away from definition of ready and moving more towards the readiness fact, frequently asked questions. So usually we come up with about 10 questions. Because they are frequently asked, we are not saying that every question must be answered in every context, but it's a reminder to the team in refinement to say, here are some questions that have helped us in the past. If appropriate, consider them. Please consider them. If appropriate, answer them. But if they are not appropriate, or it's not necessary to answer them prior to tagging an item as sprint planning ready, that's okay. So it's not a definition of ready. It's more of a readiness fact, all right? So don't institutionalize the phase gate inside Scrum. I have been in companies where there is distrust between business and development, and if product owner is from the business side, they start playing the role of maybe their interpretation of a project manager. So they start taking status reports, and their fundamental mental model is these developers are untrustworthy. So in Scrum, it's my job to keep them on a tight leash. So that's how the product owner role gets misinterpreted. And then sometimes the product owner is not available for developers because they're saying, I'm doing real work, I'm running the business. Now, in this vacuum, when the developers have questions and the product owner is not available to answer those questions, what is the unintended consequence to the business? Let me get some feedback from you folks. Those of you who have seen this happen. What happens?
Oh.
What have you seen happen? Go ahead.
There's two possibilities in my experience. What happens is the developers just go ahead with whatever they think of, which can be great, but maybe it's the wrong thing. Or the developers stop asking questions, and the developers stop asking questions. So there may be some, some important factors, some risks that they're obvious to developers that never get raised up to the product owner because they're just going to be ignored anyways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stephen. Other
Robbie, I've seen.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I've seen something different. I've seen where developers get burned, so they just sit on their hands, just say, I'm not going to move forward until the product owner answers my question. So we're going to put this product backlog item on hold.
I've seen that myself. Thank you, Mike.
In addition, when you get to the actual demo stage and you find out the disconnect is like, the product owner's like, well, what happens? Like, well, no. The developer's like, you never answered my question. You never gave me the detail I needed. So I assumed my assumption and here's what we delivered. And so when you get to those times where you get to demo where you basically wasted 75% of the time developing bad code for a unsubstantiated user story, then that brings the whole project to a halt. And so then you have to worry about doing cleanup for misunderstanding. So product owners, for their purpose, need to make sure that they provide the clarity that developers need in order for the demos to be productive. They can move forward to the next part of the next sprint.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I've seen that myself. So if your payroll for one sprint is $50,000, and as Steve was saying, 75% of the user stories had some unanswered questions, developers made some assumptions, then it's possible that, about my math is horrible, but maybe $37,000 or $35,000 worth of company money has been spent going in the wrong direction. And now you have to, as Steve was saying, now you have to clean up the mess, you have to rework. Or as Mark was saying, I've been in companies where the teams were in a holding pattern. And in fact, I was part of a multi-million-dollar program where the product owner was super busy, did not refine the stories. A lot of the developers were actually from outsourced third-party software development vendors. And by the time we got to a refined backlog, we ran out of budget because people have to get paid no matter what. And so now, first we had developers, but we had nothing to work on. And they were sitting on their hands because they were scared of taking initiative and then being wrapped on the knuckles. Because business will say, there, IT, look at those IT morons. This is why we don't trust them, because they delivered a bunch of crap. So IT is like, fool me once, shame on, what is it? Shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, whatever, right? So they're saying like, okay, I got burned. Now I'm not even going to write a single line of code. So first you have developers, but you don't have any backlog items. And then you have backlog items, but you don't have any developers. Mark, did you have a question?
So I just wanted to add, number 3 really resonates with me, because one problem that I've seen us have, we've tried to overcome, is that you have organic discussions that happen as you're working on product backlog items. And as more is learned, more decisions are made. And many times those decisions don't get put back into the product backlog item. And then some time passes and people ask, well, why did we make this decision? And it's like, well, it wasn't in the PBI. And the developers will say, well, that's the product owner's responsibility. They were the ones that should have updated that. And I just always push for it's the team's responsibility to document those decision points in the product backlog items. That's just a particular pain point for me, and number 3 just resonated with me.
Very cool. Thank you, Mark. And one thing I learned, maybe it was in a presentation from Jeff Patton. I know Raj Jokum, the Scrum.org professional Scrum product owner, steward, former steward, he taught this to me. But the example that he gave about backlog refinement was, think of the most memorable vacation you've been on in your life. And imagine you took a photograph or a picture on your cell phone of that vacation. Fast forward many years later, imagine you were on the beach and someone shows you a picture of that vacation. That one picture might bring forth a flood of memory, gigabytes of data. What did the ocean, what was the water in the ocean? What did it feel like? How cold was it? How warm was it? What did the ocean breeze feel like on your skin? What did the air smell like? What did you have before that? As I'm talking to you, I'm remembering my most, my beautiful memory I had of a vacation. It was on Cozumel. I was on the beach in Cozumel, and so many memories. I had the world's best stuffed jalapeno poppers there, but that one image can bring back a flood of memories. And what Ralph Jokum taught me was backlog refinement is something similar. If everybody is present, maybe not all of the conversations that I've had might get transcribed. The essential parts should get captured, as Mark was mentioned. And at the same time, people need to be aware that you've got to be physically, mentally, emotionally present in the moment, because when we pick up this backlog item in a few weeks, we must remember the essence of the conversation that we are having right now, even if not everything that is being said or communicated right now is not present in the story. That's individuals and interactions with processes and tools. So Mark, thank you so much. JW, I don't know if you had anything to say, or is there anyone else who had anything to add before we move on?
Actually, Robbie, I have a clarification. Could you go over number 4? Forbidding and finding the best path to achieve intent. I want to make sure I understood how you were saying that's an issue.
Yeah. So my intent here, Steve, was that the product owner should talk about the business outcome. What is the intent? Who is the human being? What is the problem they are trying to solve? What are the business outcomes we are trying to create for ourselves? And what are the outcomes we are trying to create for that person, the persona? And the product owner should stay away from designing the solution.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
With the intent, stay in the domain of the intent, the who is the user, what's the challenge, why, maybe the who, what, why. Stay away from the how. Leave how in the domain of the dev team. Right?
Okay.
Great question.
Hey, Robbie, I did have one thing. I wasn't sure where it would fall, but when you have a situation where you have a product owner who doesn't necessarily feel empowered in having 100% autonomy, and they're bowed down to the pressures of IT, knowing that it's not fulfilling the actual value trying to deliver for the business community.
Yeah, so the execs, maybe it maps loosely. Again, this is not a complete list. This is just my list. It's a flawed list, but maybe it roughly maps to number 1, where the power is held with someone else. And the product owner is a product owner in name only. It's just like a glorified order taker, right? So something to think about. Create your own list and use those lists in your coaching conversations, or better still, if you were to have a similar session in your context, ask the question and allow the wisdom to emerge from the crowds, and then complement the wisdom. And ultimately, our goal is just to heighten the situational awareness in pursuit of business value, right? So this blog, actually, this presentation is based on a blog I wrote many years ago, one of my most popular blogs. It's called 14 Stances of Highly Effective Product Owners. And the inspiration of many of the ideas in this blog and the presentation today is by some of my heroes, Barry Overeem wrote an amazing blog, 8 Stances of a Scrum Master. Gunther Verheyen, he taught me so much about Scrum. And this is a slide from the Scrum.org Professional Scrum Product Owner course. Charles Bradley, my friend, also gave a talk on the new product owner, right? So this presentation that I'm giving is a continuation of a blog and a webinar I've done. It's called Sleepless in Seattle, or rather Sleepless in CXO Land, how smart CXOs use strategic Scrum. So it builds on some of those ideas. So let's dive in, segue from we segued from superstitions to sins, and let's segue from sins to the stances of product ownership. So the most important stance is, I would say, is the chief inspiration officer. The product owner must have a compelling and inspiring goal. And the way they can do that, tying back to my blog, my other blog and webinar on Sleepless in CXO Land, was the technique that they can use is to set a big, hairy, audacious goal. Once you set a product owner sets a big, hairy, audacious goal, inspires the team, they need to create a compelling strategy. So the next stance is a chief strategic enabler. It's like a game of chess. You could master the tactics of chess, but if you don't have an overall strategy, chances are your opponent will do a checkmate, right? And then you have to connect the dots between the strategy and the tactics. So if you have user stories at the tactical level, but if you're unable to tell your dev team and your stakeholders how do these user stories connect to the strategy, it's not going to work, right? So you need strategic pillars. You need to be able to connect the dots, the user stories. One thing I've seen, there goes my dog again, give me 1 second. One thing I've seen about product ownership or a challenge is many times different product owners are part of a portfolio, and it's a zero-sum game. Budgeting for a portfolio is a zero-sum game. People, the CFO or the CEO, C-suite might say, okay, IT, you have a $20 million budget. That's all you're going to get. You guys go figure it out. Or product delivery organization, you've got $20 million this year. That's it. So now different product owners, each of whom thinks their product is the best product, they are squabbling over the budget. But we need them to elevate their thinking and not try to get as much money as they can for their product, but redefine value in the organizational context, at the portfolio context, and make the decision that's best for the overall portfolio, as opposed to trying and getting as much money for their product as possible, even if it causes damage to our family, which is our company. So they have to collaborate with other product owners. And then they have to realize that no matter how smart they might be, all they have are a series of hypotheses. So Kurt Bittner from Scrum.org says, every feature is suspect until proven to be valid by the market, right? All user stories, all epics are suspects. You don't know if it's going to work or it's not going to work. So the product owner must frame requirements, or I shouldn't say requirements, or product backlog items as hypotheses. That is also a great reminder to say, it's a hypothesis. I have no clue whether, I cannot guarantee that it's going to work. Based on what I know now, I think this is an educated guess. I think it's going to work, but let me remind myself to go and check in with the market after it goes to production, as opposed to chasing the next bright, shiny object, right? The product owner also needs to design the scoreboard, because what gets measured gets managed. And the heart of Agile and Scrum is empiricism, and empiricism requires transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And Ken Schwaber taught me that inspection requires comparing the target reality with the current reality and mining the delta for all the wisdom that it contains. But you cannot measure and compare and contrast actual reality if you never had the guts to quantify your forecast and say, what is your target reality, right? So you've got to have the guts to say, this is my forecast. You've got to quantify your forecast. You've got to visualize your forecast in a scoreboard, and you've got to remember to inspect the forecast and compare actuals to the forecast by looking at the scoreboard together and with the stakeholders, so you extract wisdom and you can course correct. You also have to create a release forecast, or you have to create a roadmap so that you can go from your current state to your aspired vision in some kind of a sequence. So you create sequence your backlog items in a logical way so that each backlog item is contributing to a sprint goal, each sprint goal is contributing to a release goal, and each release goal is contributing to your overall either quarterly goals or your roadmap. All right. And more often than not, there will be more questions than answers. There will be more features or backlog items than you can fund, than you can staff. So the product owner always has to walk this tightrope, trying to balance risks and the rewards. And if the pendulum can swings too far in either direction, then it creates imbalance or a lack of harmony. So if I am only optimizing for risks, then what I might do is I might create the most perfect product in the world, which has not a single defect, but then it may not have any value unless you're sending a person to the International Space Station. Most of us will have some tolerance for risks. And if you neglect the risk, if you neglect quality and you're chasing the rewards, you might end up delivering products that nobody wants to use because they suck from a quality perspective. So you've got to walk this tightrope, and that's the art and craft of product ownership, how to balance risks and rewards. And then you've got to sequence your experiments. So make sure that the highest items in your backlog factor in value, uncertainty, the cost, because not all 5-pointer backlog items are the same. It depends on how much value each 5-pointer the 2 5-pointers might create. So you've got to take risk, reward, cost, and dependencies as you rank your backlog. And now you've got to execute, and you've got to provide clarity, because people will have lots of questions. You yourself will get more clarity when your team actually starts delivering. And so you must discover that clarity, and you must communicate that clarity. And then when there are lots of bright, shiny objects competing, you've got to stay the course where appropriate, and laser focus the team. Hopefully, at least in the course of a sprint, you are protecting the team from being distracted by new bright, shiny objects. And hopefully you can stay the course for longer than a sprint, barring some cataclysmic events like the pandemic that we are in right now. All right. And now when you start deploying to production, chances are the market is going to give you mixed messages. And rarely, if ever, will the market come and say, just implement this user story with this acceptance criteria, and you will maximize EBITDA, or you will maximize monthly active users. Sometimes you get so many contradictory signals from the market, and you've got to sit down and try and interpret those and extract some plausible hypothesis that you can then use to adjust your backlog, right? Why do you want to do that? You want to learn, you want to read the tea leaves, and you want to learn, and you want to funnel that learning back into the organization so that you do what you're supposed to do. The highest accountability of the product owner is to be the chief value optimizer. You have to optimize sustainable, measurable, long-term organizational value, right? So a quick mapping between the stances that I've introduced in this, in my blog and in this specific webinar to my other blog, which is the framework for strategic product ownership. If you're interested, go and read this blog of mine or watch my webinar. That brings us to the end of this session. We might have some time for Q&A and some discussions. Again, if this kind of content resonates with you, check out our blogs, our videos, presentations, and our webinars, and follow us on LinkedIn. Running out of time, which is a good sign, but a couple of other things. Teams or companies that have benefited from this kind of thinking, they've usually attended our quick launch, Scrum Team quick launch or reboot. So if you're interested, we can do that for your company. And this is based on the Smooth Apps product owner playbook. All right. So as we start wrapping up, here's a quick recap of the 14 stances. What is your biggest takeaway? And if you made one adjustment to help your company as a result of attending this webinar, what might that be?
Hey, Robbie, this is Steve. I think the one thing is really in the working guest, the WIGs, is basically trying to refine, because especially as you deal with a new product, you're trying to figure out which the best thing and the best item to actually get coded. You definitely make sure you're continuing to refine it to make sure you're delivering exactly what you want. And again, you may find as you get down the line, you may need to change it, but at least as you're constantly refining it, you're constantly in the battle trying to make sure you're delivering the best product with the best value that's going to have the best impact to your bottom line. So it's constantly, as you're working on working guests, the hope is you're continuing refining to it become something that actually makes, like, it looks like your final product you actually want to produce. But you don't want to just get to the point where you just have your backlog, you put it out there, but you don't refine it to the point where you may find out, hey, we may be going in the wrong direction. So the working guest needs to get to the point where you're truly identifying what you want to deliver and what's going to be the true, I guess, most memorable product or most valuable product, however we would term want to use, that shows that we're meeting exactly what our true value proposition is.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. And some questions that have helped me is ask, how might this impact our wildly important goal? And you can substitute wildly important goal with whatever metric you're using, whether it's EBITDA, customer acquisition, customer satisfaction, NPS. How might this impact blah?
Yeah.
And also, how might this impact our most important stakeholders, the user, the customer? Mm-hmm. So that forces people to stop lobbying for that favorite user story. It forces them to take a few additional hops in the logic and to articulate their hypothesis in the context of the greater good of the organization and the greater good of the customers and users. So Steve, thank you for sharing that. Very good. Anyone else, what was your most valuable insight, and what might be the one experiment you try to help your company in the next sprint?
Hey, Robbie, this is Mark. So number 14, Chief Value Optimizer. This may be a story that you told really quick. I think it is, but I'm not sure. But you told a story of a team that ran out of time on a project, and they told their stakeholders that they were giving them 80% of the feature that they requested, and the stakeholders were sorely disappointed because they said, "Well, if you would have told me this, then we would have focused on the other 20%, because that 20% that you didn't do gave us 90% of the value. You, in essence, gave us 80% of the time to give us 10% of the value." That's always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's not one of mine, but I'm going to steal it. Very powerful. Yeah, so it's 20%. If we focus on the wrong features or users or backlog items, that's the mistake. And, you know, I've heard about some comments or some ideas that Scrum is about, you know, getting twice the work done from half the people in half the time. I have a concern with that kind of thinking. In my mind, Scrum is really about eliminating waste. So I would say getting twice as or half the waste from people, or maybe it's more than that. It's a waste reduction technique. It's not about squeezing more from the turnip, squeezing more from the team. And the way you find the waste is through those conversations. And if the product owner is not available in clarifying what is and is not valuable in a vacuum, developers will make the wrong decision. Their heart is in the right place, but they don't understand the context as well as the product owner does. And so we can have a situation like what Mark just mentioned. Thank you, Mark. All right, maybe one last comment, and then we can wrap up.
I think this is Steve. I think maybe one more might be, maybe you've got it captured here, but we talk about the developers not knowing what to do, what's the best option. But part of the product owner's job is to make sure they understand that goal, that overall goal, and the kind of maybe not all the details, but give them some context for making the right decision. So maybe it's also the chief proselytizer, you know, maybe you said the chief connector, making sure that everyone on the whole, down to the teams, know kind of where they're navigating to. I don't know.
Yeah. I like the chief proselytizing officer, the evangelist.
Evangelist, yeah.
So they have to evangelize and have to inspire people. I had the blessing of working with one such product owner. When he got up in front of the room, he was such an inspiring speaker. I could look at the body language of the developers. They were wrapped in attention, and they would walk to the end of the world for that product owner because he could tell stories in the context of the human beings whose lives they were trying to serve. So that's so important.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly. So, so the developers could connect what they need to do next without even asking, right? They knew what to do.
Yeah, and you know, that reminds me that they talk about the 3 C's of user story: the card, conversation, and the confirmation. And the 4th C is really the context. And if we don't provide the context, then it's just bunch of woods and we miss the wood. Bunch of trees and we miss the woods or the trees. All right, friends. I hope you found this useful. I want to respect your time, give you a few more minutes just in case you have to rush to your next meeting. You get some breathing room. It's been a pleasure to have you on this webinar, and I hope it was a good use of your time. Until the next time we meet, thank you. Keep calm and come on.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ravi.
Thank you, Ravi. Appreciate it.
Thank you.